The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council Station caught the light from 3 different stars as it slowly rotated above the planet Vega Prime. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique biological needs. The air recyclers worked overtime to maintain the complex atmospheric mixture that kept everyone breathing comfortably. Captain, Jake Morrison adjusted his collar and tried not to let his frustration show on his face. He had been sitting in the human delegation section for 6 hours now, listening to the council debate whether the Alteran trade ships should be allowed to carry an extra ton of cargo per vessel. 6 hours for 1 ton of cargo. Meanwhile, the reports on his datapad told a very different story about what was happening in the galaxy. The Keth-Zephyrian border had seen 3 more skirmishes this week. The refugee camps on Titan 7 were running out of food. The mining riots on Beta Colony had spread to 2 more worlds. But the council wanted to talk about cargo limits. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat next to Jake, her fingers tapping silently on her armrest. She had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 8 years now, and Jake could see the weariness in her eyes. Behind them sat the rest of the human delegation, 23 of the best diplomats, scientists, and military advisors that Earth had to offer. "The question before us," announced Council Speaker Thais Ka in his mechanical translator voice, "is whether this change in cargo regulations might affect the delicate balance of trade between the inner and outer rim systems." Jake almost laughed. Delicate balance. Half the outer rim was on fire, and they were worried about cargo space. He glanced at his datapad again. Admiral Clark had sent another urgent message from the human fleet stationed near the Keth border. Both sides were building up their forces, and the situation was getting worse every day. "Perhaps we should table this discussion until next session," suggested Representative Vex 9 from the Andromedan Collective. "We have many other important matters to address. More important matters." Jake looked at the agenda on his screen. Next up was a debate about whether to change the color of the Council's official seal. After that, a discussion about the proper protocol for greeting ceremonies. Nothing about the refugee crisis. Nothing about the border war. Nothing about the pandemic spreading through the outer colonies. "I believe the human delegation has something to say about the border situation," said Council Member Zara Prime, though her tone suggested she was just following protocol rather than actually wanting to hear from them. Lisa stood up slowly. Jake had seen that look on her face before, usually right before she delivered bad news to someone who didn't want to hear it. "The human delegation has been monitoring the Keth-Zephyrian situation for 3 months now. We have submitted 14 separate reports detailing the escalating tensions and providing recommendations for immediate intervention." Yes, Thais Ka waved one of his forearms dismissively. "We are all aware of your concerns, Ambassador Carter. However, we must consider all perspectives before taking any hasty action." "Hasty action," Lisa repeated quietly. 3 months of warnings is hasty action." "The humans are always so eager to rush into conflict," commented Elder Kethis from his floating platform. "Perhaps if you spent less time looking for problems and more time seeking peaceful solutions, you would see that these matters often resolve themselves." Jake felt his jaw clench. Peaceful solutions. The humans had prevented 12 different wars in the past 5 years through careful diplomacy and strategic positioning of peacekeeping forces. They had negotiated trade agreements that kept entire sectors from economic collapse. They had coordinated disaster relief efforts that saved millions of lives. But sure, they were just looking for problems. "The refugee situation on Titan 7 requires immediate attention," Lisa continued, ignoring the interruption. "We have 40,000 displaced persons living in temporary shelters that were designed for 10,000. Food supplies will run out in 18 days, medical supplies in 12. The Outer Rim colonies knew the risks when they chose to settle in those dangerous areas," said Representative Quintek. "Perhaps this will encourage them to make better choices in the future." "They're not dangerous by choice," Jake found himself saying, even though he wasn't supposed to speak without being recognized by the speaker. "They're dangerous because no one here wants to deal with the pirate raids and territorial disputes that make them dangerous." Thais Ka's mechanical voice took on what Jake assumed was supposed to be a stern tone. "Captain Morrison, you are out of order. And might I remind the human delegation that emotional outbursts are not helpful in diplomatic discussions." "Emotional outbursts," Jake looked around the chamber at the representatives who were literally letting people die, while they debated cargo regulations and seal colors. If caring about 40,000 refugees was an emotional outburst, then he was guilty as charged. The council has noted the human concerns, Thiska continued. However, we must also consider the financial implications of any relief efforts. The Budget Committee has determined that funding for Outer Rim assistance programs should be reduced by 15% to account for administrative costs. Lisa's hand stopped tapping on her armrest. Reduced by 15%. Yes. The committee felt that some of the previous aid efforts were unnecessarily generous. We must be more efficient with council resources. Jake watched Lisa's face carefully. He had worked with her long enough to recognize the signs. The slight tightening around her eyes. The way her shoulders straightened just a fraction. The completely calm expression that meant she was absolutely furious. At the same time, Thiska went on, apparently oblivious to the warning signs. We will need human peacekeeping forces to address the mining riots on Beta Colony, Gamma Station, and New Cardiff. These disturbances are disrupting trade routes and making several species quite uncomfortable. You want us to send our people to stop riots? Lisa said in a perfectly level voice. Yes, human forces have proven quite effective at managing these sorts of civil disturbances. While you cut funding for refugee relief, the two matters are entirely separate, Ambassador Carter. Surely you can see the difference between necessary peacekeeping operations and optional charitable activities. Jake saw Lisa's hand move to the small stack of documents in front of her. She picked them up slowly, aligned the edges with mechanical precision, and placed them in her briefcase. Then she stood up and closed the briefcase with a soft click that somehow seemed to echo through the vast chamber. The human delegation withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately, she said in a voice that carried clearly to every corner of the hall. All human personnel, assets, and agreements are hereby recalled. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant hum of the air recyclers seemed to pause. Jake felt a strange mix of shock and relief wash over him as he realized what had just happened. Lisa picked up her briefcase and walked toward the exit. Jake and the rest of the human delegation followed her, their footsteps the only sound in the massive hall. As they reached the doors, Jake heard Thiska's voice behind them, confused and somehow smaller than before. Ambassador Carter, surely we can discuss this. Lisa paused at the doorway without turning around. There's nothing left to discuss, she said. Then she walked out, and the age of human participation in galactic government came to an end. The communications array on Admiral Stephen Clark's flagship lit up like a Christmas tree exactly 47 minutes after Ambassador Carter walked out of the council chambers. Message after message poured in from human ships, stations, and outposts, scattered across 17 different star systems. Every captain, every commander, every station chief wanted to know if the rumors were true. Stephen stood in the command center of the heavy cruiser Defiance, watching the tactical display that showed the positions of every human vessel in known space. 234 ships ranging from massive hospital ships to small patrol craft. 312 space stations, research outposts, and forward bases. Thousands of personnel embedded in joint operations with alien species who had come to depend on human expertise. Sir, we're getting confirmation from Earth Command, reported Communications Officer Betty Hayes. Ambassador Carter's withdrawal statement is official. We're to begin immediate extraction protocols. Stephen nodded and activated the fleet-wide channel. His voice would reach every human in space within the next few minutes. All human vessels and personnel, this is Admiral Clark. As of 1500 hours Galactic Standard Time, humanity has officially withdrawn from the Galactic Council. Operation Homecoming is now in effect. All ships are to begin extraction procedures immediately. On Vega Station, Dr. Amanda Torres was in the middle of performing surgery on a Zephyrian diplomat who had suffered a severe allergic reaction to atmospheric processors. Her hands never wavered as her assistant, Nurse Carl Johnson, quietly informed her of the withdrawal order. The patient's life took priority over politics, but as soon as the surgery was complete, she began the complex process of transferring her patients to alien medical staff who had never performed half the procedures Amanda considered routine. Dr. Torres, said Chief Medical Officer Thisra, surely you cannot abandon your patients in the middle of treatment cycles. Amanda looked around the medical bay at the dozens of alien patients from 7 different species. She had spent 3 years learning their unique physiologies, developing new treatment protocols, training the alien medical staff in advanced human surgical techniques. "I'm not abandoning anyone," she said quietly. "I'm transferring care to qualified personnel and providing complete medical records for every patient. But you are the only one here who understands the neural pathway reconstruction procedure. Patient Vex Prime will die without your continued treatment." Amanda paused. Vex Prime was a young Andromedan who had been paralyzed in a shuttle accident. The neural reconstruction was a human development that could restore full mobility, but it required weekly treatments for 6 months. "I'll stay until a replacement can be trained," she said finally. "But understand this is a humanitarian exception, not a change in policy." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on station after station. Chief Engineer Paul Davis stood in the main reactor room of Titan Station, looking at the massive fusion core that kept 40,000 beings alive in the cold of space. The reactor was human-designed, human-built, and required human maintenance protocols that took years to master. "You cannot simply leave," said Station Administrator Keth 9. "No one else understands the quantum containment field adjustments. The station will lose power within weeks." Paul handed over a data pad containing every schematic, every maintenance protocol, every emergency procedure that kept the station running. "Everything you need is in there. I've also left detailed video instructions for the key procedures. You have 2 weeks of my time to train replacement personnel. 2 weeks to learn what took you 3 years to master." "That's what you have," Paul said. "I suggest you start immediately." On the border between Keth and Zephyrian space, Captain Rachel Stone received her withdrawal orders just as her ship was mediating a tense standoff between 2 alien fleets. The Keth Admiral was demanding passage through Zephyrian space for a diplomatic convoy. The Zephyrian commander insisted that any Keth ships in their territory would be considered an act of war. Captain Stone transmitted Admiral Keth 7. "Your presence here is crucial for maintaining peace. Surely Earth would not abandon its commitment to preventing bloodshed?" Rachel looked at her tactical display. 37 Keth ships faced off against 42 Zephyrian vessels, weapons powered but not yet targeted. For 3 months, human ships had been the neutral party, keeping these 2 fleets from opening fire on each other. "Admiral, I'm transmitting our complete analysis of the territorial dispute, including 3 different compromise solutions that both sides have previously indicated they might accept. My ship will remain on station for 12 more hours to allow time for you to establish direct communication protocols." 12 hours. "Captain, it will take weeks to negotiate a replacement mediation system." "Then I suggest you begin immediately," Rachel said, echoing Paul's words from across the galaxy. The scope of the human withdrawal became clear as reports flooded back to Earth Command. Humans were evacuating from 43 space stations where they had served as everything from chief engineers to head medical officers. They were pulling out of 17 active conflict zones where human peacekeepers had been the only thing preventing open warfare. They were recalling aid workers from refugee camps, diplomatic staff from trade negotiations, and technical advisors from a dozen different infrastructure projects. Captain Greg Harrison commanded a small monitoring vessel on the edge of Galactic Council space. His job was to track communications and ensure that the withdrawal proceeded smoothly. What he heard in those first 48 hours told a story that would have been funny if it wasn't so serious. Council Station to all vessels. "We need immediate technical support for atmospheric processor malfunction," came one. Transmission. "This is Trade Vessel Vega 7 requesting emergency medical assistance for crew member experiencing unknown biological crisis," came. Another. "Defense grid control to any available ships. We have multiple system failures and cannot locate the human technical staff who usually handle repairs." Greg shook his head as he listened to transmission after transmission, requesting help that wouldn't be coming. He opened a channel to Admiral Clark. "Sir, you need to hear this. The Council is broadcasting general distress calls on 17 different emergency frequencies. They're asking for any available human personnel to respond to critical situations." "Any response from our people?" "No, sir. Orders are being followed exactly. Complete withdrawal. No exceptions except for genuine humanitarian emergencies already in progress." The irony wasn't lost on Greg. For 30 years, humans had been the ones responding to every crisis, solving every problem, keeping the galaxy running smoothly. Now, after less than 2 days of human absence, the same species who had called them overly emotional and unnecessarily interventionist were desperately begging for help. On Earth, President Kate Wilson stood in the Situation Room watching the global map that showed the positions of every returning human vessel. Each green dot represented a ship, station, or outpost that was coming home. The logistics were staggering. Earth hadn't seen this many returning ships since the Great Migration 2 centuries ago. "Ma'am," said her aide, "we're receiving formal diplomatic requests from 12 different species asking us to reconsider the withdrawal." Kate looked at the communications board showing dozens of incoming messages from alien governments. "Standard reply to all of them," she said. "The withdrawal is final and non-negotiable. Any future diplomatic contact will be conducted between equals, not as part of Council membership." As the second day of Operation Homecoming ended, the true scale of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became undeniable. They weren't just members of the Council. They were the engineers who kept the stations running, the doctors who treated alien diseases, the diplomats who prevented wars, the technicians who maintained systems that no one else understood. And now they were gone. 3 weeks after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the first major crisis erupted exactly where Captain Jake Morrison had predicted it would. The Keth-Zephyrian border exploded into open warfare when a Keth supply convoy refused to submit to Zephyrian inspection and opened fire on the patrol ships that tried to stop them. Council Speaker Thaiske stood in the emergency session chamber watching the tactical display that showed red warning symbols spreading across 17 different star systems. Without human mediators, the two species had abandoned all pretense of diplomacy and were settling their territorial disputes with weapons. "This is clearly a temporary setback," announced Military Coordinator Vex 9, though his mechanical voice carried less confidence than usual. "We simply need to deploy Council peacekeeping forces to restore order." "What peacekeeping forces?" asked Representative Quintek. 60% of our peacekeeping operations were handled by human personnel. The remaining forces are scattered across 12 different conflicts that were previously managed by human diplomatic missions. Thiska activated the communications array to contact both warring species. The response from Keth Admiral 7 was immediate and hostile. "The Council has proven itself incapable of fair mediation. We reject any non-human arbitration of this conflict." The Zephyrian response was equally blunt. "Your species have shown nothing but bias toward the Keth position. We will accept only human mediation, as they were the only neutral party we trusted." But the humans were gone, and they weren't coming back. On Titan 7, the refugee camp that Ambassador Lisa Carter had warned about descended into chaos exactly 18 days after the human withdrawal. Food supplies ran out first, then medical supplies. Then the water purification systems began failing without human technicians to maintain them. Camp Administrator Thais Prime sent increasingly desperate messages to the Council, but the response was always the same. Emergency supplies were being processed through proper channels. Aid would arrive as soon as the Budget Committee approved the expenditures. Everything would be handled according to standard procedures that took 6 weeks to approve emergency food, shipments for people who would be dead in 6 days. The Ultraran flu pandemic that Dr. Amanda Torres had been monitoring spread through the Outer Rim colonies like wildfire. Without human medical personnel to coordinate the response, each world was left to handle the crisis alone. The Alterans themselves had immunity to their own disease, but every other species was vulnerable. Dr. Thais Medical sent frantic requests to the Council for human medical assistance. "The death toll is approaching 100,000, his message read. "We need human expertise in cross-species pathology immediately. Our own medical knowledge is insufficient to develop effective treatments." The Council's response was to form a committee to study the feasibility of training replacement medical personnel. The committee would report back in 6 months with preliminary recommendations. Captain Rachel Stone monitored the galactic communications channels from her ship New Horizon, now safely within the Sol system's defensive perimeter. The communications array picked up everything from official Council transmissions to desperate civilian distress calls. "Captain," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving over 200 emergency requests for human assistance every day. Medical emergencies, technical failures, diplomatic crises, supply shortages. The requests are coming from 43 different species. Rachel looked at the data scrolling across her screen. Each request represented real people facing real problems that humans could solve in a matter of hours or days. Problems that alien governments seemed incapable of handling on their own. Any response from Earth Command. Standard reply only. All requests are acknowledged and declined. Earth's position remains unchanged. On the Council Station itself, basic systems began failing in ways that no one had anticipated. The main computer core that managed atmospheric systems across the massive structure started producing error codes that none of the alien technicians could interpret. The errors were in human programming language, written by human engineers who had departed 3 weeks ago. Chief Technical Officer Vex Prime stood in the computer core chamber staring at screens full of incomprehensible code. How did we become so dependent on human technical knowledge? He asked his assistant. The humans always volunteered to handle the complex programming tasks, came the reply. They said it was more efficient than training multiple species in human computer languages. More efficient. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. Let the humans handle the difficult technical work, while other species focused on their own specialties. No one had realized that entire systems had been designed around human knowledge that no other species possessed. The economic systems were collapsing just as badly. The Stellar Banking Consortium had relied on human accountants to manage the impossibly complex mathematics of multi-species commerce. Different species used different number systems, different currencies, different concepts of value and interest. Human economists had developed the formulas that made galactic trade possible. Without them, the entire economic structure was grinding to a halt. "We need to contact Earth immediately," declared Elder Kethis during another emergency council session. "Surely they will reconsider when they see the scope of the crisis." "We have sent 4 separate diplomatic missions to the Sol system," Thais-Ka replied. All were turned away at the system's edge. The human response is always the same. No council representatives will be allowed into human space. "Then we go around the council," suggested Zara Prime. "Individual species can approach Earth directly. 17 species have already tried. The human response is identical to everyone. No council members, no council allies, no council associates. Complete isolation until further notice." The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. The automated defense grid protecting the core worlds was failing because human engineers had designed the software and no one else understood how to repair it. Food distribution networks were collapsing because humans had been the ones coordinating dietary requirements between dozens of species with completely different nutritional needs. Even simple things like maintenance, schedules for space elevators, and atmospheric processors were failing because they had been organized using human planning systems that no other species had bothered to learn. Council member Vextech reviewed the latest damage reports with growing horror. "How did we not see this?" he asked. "How did we not realize that humans were managing so many critical systems?" "Because they never asked for recognition," Thais-Ka admitted. "They simply saw problems and solved them. We assumed these were minor contributions, not essential infrastructure." The truth was becoming undeniable. Humanity hadn't just been members of galactic civilization. They had been its foundation. They were the engineers who kept everything running, the doctors who kept everyone healthy, the diplomats who kept everyone from killing each other, the economists who kept trade flowing, the programmers who made the computers work. For 30 years, humans had quietly solved every problem, prevented every crisis, and maintained every system that made galactic civilization possible. They had done it so efficiently and so quietly that everyone else had forgotten how much they depended on human expertise. Now, with humans gone, the galaxy was learning just how much they had taken for granted. The lesson was coming at a price measured in wars, plagues, famines, and the slow collapse of everything that had made peace and prosperity possible. And still, the humans weren't coming back. 2 months after humanity vanished from galactic civilization, Council Speaker Thais-Ka stood before an emergency assembly that looked nothing like the confident governing body it had been just weeks earlier. Half the seats were empty because their occupants were dealing with crises on their homeworlds. The other half were filled with representatives who looked exhausted, desperate, and angry. "The situation has become untenable," announced Elder Kethis, his usual composed demeanor cracked with strain. "The Keth-Zephyrian War has spread to 7 systems. The Alteran plague has killed over 500,000 beings. The core world defense grid is operating at 30% capacity. We are facing the complete collapse of galactic civilization. Representative Quintek activated his holographic display, showing economic data that painted a picture of systematic failure. Trade volume has dropped by 60%. The banking system has processed 0 interspecies transactions in the past 3 weeks. 17 colonies are reporting critical supply shortages. And still Earth refuses all contact, added Zara Prime bitterly. 4 more species sent diplomatic missions to the Sol system this week. All were turned away without negotiation. Thaiska had spent sleepless nights reviewing the records of human participation in council affairs. What he found terrified him. In 30 years of membership, humans had submitted over 2,000 detailed reports identifying potential problems and proposing solutions. The council had acted on perhaps 50 of those recommendations. The rest had been filed away and forgotten. Every current crisis had been predicted by human analysis. Every failing system had been flagged by human technical reports. Every war now raging had been warned about inhuman diplomatic assessments that the Council had dismissed as overly cautious. We need to offer them something they cannot refuse, declared military. Coordinator Vex 9. Full Council membership with permanent leadership positions, guaranteed funding for all human projects, whatever they want. Based on what? Kethis asked. We ignored everything they told us for 3 decades. Why would they believe any promises we make now? The truth was that the Council had no leverage left. They needed humanity far more than humanity needed them. Earth had closed its borders completely, but intelligence reports suggested that human space was thriving. Ships entering and leaving the Sol system carried advanced technology that made previous human contributions look primitive. Humanity hadn't just survived the separation from galactic civilization. They had flourished. Perhaps we approach this differently, suggested Council member Thais Peace. Instead of offering them what we think they want, we ask them what it would take to restore some level of cooperation. And how do we ask them anything when they refuse to speak to us? Thais Peace activated her communication console. We send them something they cannot ignore. A complete acknowledgement of our failures and a formal request for their terms. The message that went out to Earth 3 hours later was unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Instead of demands or threats or bargaining positions, it was a simple admission of dependency and failure. The Council acknowledged that they had been wrong about human contributions to galactic stability. They admitted that current crises had been predicted and could have been prevented if human advice had been followed. They requested nothing except the opportunity to hear what humanity would require to consider limited cooperation. Captain Greg Harrison received the transmission. While monitoring communications from his position on the edge of human space, he read it twice, then forwarded it immediately to Earth. Command with a note that this was the first Council communication that sounded like genuine acknowledgement rather than political maneuvering. The response from Earth came 48 hours later, transmitted on the same frequency the Council had used. It was not from any government official or diplomatic corps. It was signed by Ambassador Lisa Carter, now serving as Earth's Secretary of Galactic Affairs. The people of Earth acknowledge receipt of the Galactic Council's message. We are prepared to discuss limited humanitarian assistance under the following conditions. First, all requests for aid must be submitted with complete documentation of the crisis, including acknowledgement of previous human warnings that were ignored. Second, human personnel will operate under Earth authority, not Council authority. Third, any species requesting assistance must formally acknowledge that they are seeking help as equals, not subordinates. Fourth, Earth reserves the right to approve or deny any request based on our own priorities and resources. These terms are impossible, protested Vex 9 when the Council reviewed the message. They are asking us to admit failure in every request for help. Because we did fail, Thaiska said quietly. Every crisis we face was preventable. Every system failure was predicted. Every war was warned about. The humans are not asking us to admit to failure. They are asking us to admit to the truth. Elder Kethis reviewed the Earth response again. They are not demanding territory or resources or political power. They are demanding respect. They want to be acknowledged as equals, who choose to help rather than subordinates, who are expected to help. The first test of the new relationship came 3 days later when the plague on Altera Prime reached critical levels. Following Earth's requirements, The Altaran government submitted a formal request that included complete medical data, acknowledgement that human medical personnel had warned about pandemic risks 6 months earlier, and a statement that they were seeking assistance as equals from a sovereign Earth government. Dr. Amanda Torres received the assignment personally from Earth's medical command. She read through the Altaran request and found something she had never seen in 30 years of galactic service: genuine acknowledgement of human expertise and a respectful request for help, rather than an expectation that humans would solve their problems. Interesting, she told her assistant as she began preparing a medical team for deployment. They actually said please. The medical mission to Altara Prime was unlike any human operation during their council membership. The Altaran government provided complete cooperation, immediate access to all medical facilities, and detailed reports on everything the human team recommended. There were no committees to review human suggestions, no bureaucratic delays, no dismissive comments about human methods. Within 2 weeks, Dr. Torres and her team had developed an effective treatment protocol and trained Altaran medical personnel to continue the work independently. The plague was contained, the death toll stopped rising, and for the first time since the human withdrawal, a galactic crisis was resolved quickly and efficiently. The success on Altara Prime led to more requests following Earth's format. The Zephyrian government asked for human mediation in their border conflict, formally acknowledging that previous human warnings about territorial disputes had been accurate. A mining consortium requested human technical assistance for equipment failures, including documentation of human safety recommendations that had been ignored for cost reasons. Each request followed the same pattern: complete honesty about the situation, acknowledgement of previous human input that had been dismissed, and respectful requests for assistance between equals. Captain Rachel Stone found herself assigned to mediate the Keth-Zephyrian border dispute under the new protocols. Instead of being expected to solve the problem while both sides ignored her recommendations, she arrived to find detailed position papers from both governments, explaining their perspectives and expressing willingness to accept human arbitration. "This is what diplomacy should feel like," she told her crew as they reviewed the situation. Both sides actually want to solve the problem instead of just being seen to participate in negotiations. The new relationship was working, but it was fundamentally different from the old council system. Humans were no longer the galaxy's automatic problem solvers. They were an independent power that chose when and how to help based on their own assessment of the situation and the respect shown by those requesting assistance. The galaxy was learning a lesson that would reshape interspecies relations for generations to come. Sometimes the most powerful response to being taken for granted is simply walking away, and sometimes the only way to earn respect is to demand it. 6 months after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, Elder Kethis of the First Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system in the most advanced diplomatic vessel the Council could provide. He had been chosen for this mission because he was the only Council member who had never openly criticized human methods or dismissed human warnings. The human response to his arrival was swift and professional. A sleek escort vessel approached his ship with a message from Earth Traffic Control. "Elder Kethis, you are cleared for approach to Luna Station. Please follow the designated flight path and prepare for standard diplomatic processing." As his ship approached the moon, Kethis stared out the viewport at what had once been a simple research outpost and mining facility. Luna Station now sprawled across the lunar surface like a gleaming city, its towers reaching toward space while its foundations extended deep into the moon's core. Massive shipyards orbited the station, building vessels that made his own ship look primitive by comparison. "Impressive," his pilot commented. "Intelligence reports suggested rapid development, but this exceeds all projections." Kethis nodded grimly. Humanity hadn't just survived their separation from galactic civilization. They had used the time to advance their technology by decades. The ships he could see in the orbital yards were clearly superior to anything in the Council fleet. Dr. Lauren Mitchell greeted Kethis at the station's diplomatic reception area. She had been Earth's lead scientist during the Council years, but now she wore the insignia of Director of Technological Development. The changes in her were immediately apparent. Gone was the somewhat apologetic demeanor she had shown when presenting research to skeptical council committees. In its place was the quiet confidence of someone who knew her work was valued and respected. "Welcome to Luna Station, Elder Kethis," she said formally. I trust your journey was comfortable. Quite comfortable, thank you, Dr. Mitchell. I must say the developments here are remarkable. Our intelligence reports suggested rapid progress, but seeing it firsthand is quite different. Lauren smiled slightly. Humanity has always been innovative. We simply had more time to focus on development. Once we stopped spending our energy trying to convince others to listen to our ideas, Kethis was led through corridors lined with displays showing human achievements from the past 6 months. Fusion reactors that produced 3 times the energy of previous designs. Medical scanners that could detect diseases at the cellular level before symptoms appeared. Agricultural systems that could grow crops in environments that had previously been considered uninhabitable. How? Kethis asked as they paused before a display showing a terraforming project on Mars. How did you achieve so much progress in such a short time? We stopped arguing and started building, Lauren replied simply. For 30 years, our best minds spent half their time explaining why their ideas would work to people who didn't want to hear them. Now those same minds spend all their time actually implementing their ideas. The meeting chamber where Kethis was taken for formal negotiations was unlike any diplomatic facility he had ever seen. Instead of the formal seating arrangements and ceremonial decorations typical of galactic diplomacy, it was a simple conference room with comfortable chairs and walls covered with technical diagrams and star charts. Ambassador Lisa Carter entered the room, carrying a single datapad and wearing the same calm expression she had shown when walking out of the council chambers 6 months earlier. Behind her came Admiral Stephen Clark, Dr. Amanda Torres, and Chief Engineer Paul Davis, the core group of humans who had once tried to keep galactic civilization functioning. Elder Kethis, Lisa said, taking a seat across from him. I understand you have a proposal to discuss. Kethis activated his holographic display, showing the current state of galactic affairs. Red zones marked active conflicts, orange areas showed regions suffering from critical supply shortages, and yellow sections indicated systems with failing infrastructure. Nearly half the galaxy was marked with some form of crisis indicator. The situation has stabilized somewhat since Earth began providing limited assistance, he began. The Altaran plague has been contained thanks to Dr. Torres's medical protocols. The Keth-Zephyrian border conflict has been resolved through Captain Stone's mediation. Several critical system failures have been repaired using human technical expertise. But, Lisa prompted, these are temporary solutions. Without sustained human involvement, these problems will return. We need a new framework for cooperation that acknowledges the reality of human capabilities and galactic dependencies. Lisa touched her datapad, and the room's display showed a different map of the galaxy. This one highlighted human colonies, trade routes, and research facilities that had expanded dramatically in the past 6 months. Earth's sphere of influence now extended far beyond the Sol system. Elder Kethis, let me show you our perspective on the situation, she said. Earth is no longer dependent on galactic civilization for resources, technology, or security. Our colonies are thriving. Our technology is advancing rapidly, and our people are happier and more productive than they have been in decades. Admiral Clark leaned forward. The question isn't whether humanity needs the galaxy, Elder Kethis. The question is what kind of relationship benefits everyone involved. Kethis studied the human displays with growing understanding. You're not interested in rejoining the Council? Correct, Lisa confirmed. The Council structure assumes that all species are essentially equal in capability, and that decisions should be made by committee consensus. Our experience suggests that this approach leads to inefficiency, delayed responses to crises, and political compromises that ignore practical realities. Then what do you propose? Dr. Torres spoke for the first time. Partnership between equals. Earth operates as an independent power that chooses to cooperate with other species based on mutual benefit and respect. No committees, no bureaucracy, no expectation that we will solve every problem while being criticized for our methods. Paul Davis activated another display showing the technical specifications for several human innovations. We're willing to share advanced technology with species that demonstrate genuine commitment to using it responsibly. We're willing to provide technical assistance for infrastructure projects that meet our safety and efficiency standards. We're willing to mediate disputes between species that accept our authority to make binding decisions. But, Admiral Clark continued, all of this happens on our terms according to our schedule, based on our assessment of the situation. No species has the right to demand our assistance. Every request is evaluated independently. Lisa pulled up the final display, showing a proposed structure for human-galactic relations. Earth establishes formal diplomatic relationships with individual species rather than the Council as a whole. Each species that wants to work with us negotiates separate agreements covering trade, technology sharing, and mutual assistance. We maintain the right to refuse any agreement that doesn't serve our interests. Kathy studied the proposal carefully. It was unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Instead of the collective decision-making structure of the Council, humanity was proposing a hub-and-spoke system with Earth at the center. You're asking us to abandon the Council structure entirely. We're asking you to acknowledge reality, Lisa replied. The Council structure failed because it was based on the assumption that all problems could be solved through discussion and compromise. Some problems require immediate action by people who understand the technical realities involved. Some decisions are too important to be left to committee votes. And if species refuse to accept this new arrangement, Admiral Clark shrugged, then they handle their problems without human assistance. We won't force anyone to work with us, but we also won't work with anyone who doesn't respect our sovereignty and expertise. Kethis realized that he was witnessing the birth of a new form of galactic organization. Humanity wasn't trying to dominate other species or impose their will through force. They were simply establishing clear boundaries and expectations for any future cooperation. I'll need to discuss this proposal with my government, he said finally. Of course, Lisa agreed. Take all the time you need. Earth isn't going anywhere, and neither are our policies. When you're ready to work with us as equals, we'll be here. As Kethis prepared to leave Luna Station, he understood that the galaxy faced a fundamental choice. They could adapt to the new reality of human independence and earn the benefits of human cooperation through respect and reciprocity. Or they could continue trying to function without human assistance and face the consequences of their own limitations. The age of human subordination was over. The age of human partnership was just beginning, and it would be conducted entirely on humanity's terms.